if we want. All right. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Doug.
Welcome to This Guy's Gotta Go. Sometimes I feel like I take my other issues out on Donald Trump. Like we were just having trouble getting the live stream to go, and I kept thinking, thanks, Trump. So I think sometimes I displace and I project my frustrations about other things on Donald Trump. And here's why. Because he's a disaster to such a level that I just keep thinking, if he weren't so irritating to me, if he weren't so threatening to the well-being of the country, if he didn't put so many people's lives and well-being at risk, maybe I would think clearer. Like I'm really deep down the hole of it's Donald Trump. And this week's installment of This Guy Has Got to Go will articulate many of the reasons why I think that, because it's just chock full. Since we talked some 9 days ago, we took an extra couple days in between because we rushed the podcast last week. But now we're back at it. It's Wednesday, so it's time to remind ourselves that on Hump Day, someday we're going to get rid of this guy. And you know what? 6 months from yesterday, we're inside the 6-month window. This guy, it's our chance to have this guy go. It's our chance to send him on his way. And you're confident he's not going to be reelected. We chatted about this last night. Is your confidence staying strong?
It is. Like you, I was confident that Donald Trump would not be elected in the first place. And so any feelings of confidence that he's not going to be reelected, are certainly colored by the surprise that was 2016. That being said, Donald Trump won in 2016 by the thinnest of margins. I mean, like in our lifetime, maybe the only thinner margin of victory was, George W. Bush by 500 votes in Florida, asterisk.
Boy, the Republicans just know how to pull it out at the end, don't they? They just really know how to rally right at the last minute and just sneak in before the buzzer.
Listen, you play until the whistle blows. So I think that. So when you recognize the very thin margin that Donald Trump won by, 70,000 votes in 4 states.
Fair enough.
Those were states in which, famously, Secretary Clinton did not campaign in the last 2 weeks of presidential campaign in 2016, against the urging of her husband, who recognized that those states were in play and was apparently behind the scenes.
I was telling her constantly.
Yeah, sending her texts.
She wouldn't listen. Partly because I have no access to contact her at all, but I was shouting at my television. I was writing it on Facebook. I was telling it to my wife for her to, asking that Hillary would overhear. Yeah.
Yeah. For whatever reason, the Hillary campaign team was confident in those states and
keep going. I got to go grab something. Keep talking. I'm hearing you.
They did not campaign in those states in the final 2 weeks of the election, while Donald Trump did. You also take into account the number of people who stayed home in 2016, because I think many people felt like there was no good choices in 2016, and this common feeling amongst people, no good choices in 2016. So people stayed home. You look at voter turnout in Democratic primary this year compared to 4 years ago and previous years, turnout is up dramatically before COVID-19 hit, and even since COVID-19 hit in some states, down in Illinois, but up in Florida, up dramatically in Virginia, up dramatically in Colorado. I think like 300% in Colorado. I'm going on memory. It's been a few weeks since I looked at these stats. Really remarkable turnout. I don't think you're going to have people staying home this time around.
Okay.
That cuts into the margin of victory.
Yeah.
I think also when you factor in Part of the work that we do is, talking to faith voters, religiously motivated voters, that Donald Trump won significantly in 2016. Any drop in that support represents tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of votes. He just, by way of statistics, he won 81% of white evangelical vote in 2016. In 2018, Republican candidates for Congress got 75% of the white evangelical vote. So and then there was, some polling out this week that white evangelical support of Donald Trump, I think was 66% was the number.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump gets 70% of even 75% of the white evangelical vote, that is such a staggering number of voters that, it just cuts into his margin of victory.
So I don't know if I told you this, but I ran the numbers. I went through in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, states that vote common goods can be working hard in, and did some numbers on evangelical voter turnout and evangelical voter support. So total number of evangelical voters and so on. If there's a 5% decline just in the evangelical votes, if that just decreases 5%, that's more, almost sometimes by double the amount that Donald Trump won that state, that state by, because as you brought up, the margins were so thin. So if you get any other lift, more turnout from some other constituencies that voted for Trump, turn away anything else, it all starts to add up on that side. But having said that,
and then when you factor in, the third thing is you factor in Eastern Pennsylvania, particularly northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you got a real thing about one particular county, don't you?
Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania.
Just like hearing you say
went for Obama twice,
Lackawanna,
and then went for Trump. Joe Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania, has deep roots in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Which is in Lackawanna County?
Which is in Lackawanna County, as is the Bible college that I went to. And so I've lived in Lackawanna County for 4 years. If, just that county alone shifts, Trump can't win Pennsylvania. And Trump doesn't win Pennsylvania, he can't win the presidency. So really, like you look at
Pennsylvania plus one, though, right? Pennsylvania plus one, other state.
But like you look at all of.
You're saying if the conditions that cause him to not win Pennsylvania are in play, then he won't win some other places.
Exactly, and you see over and over and over again that like the numbers are all trending against Donald Trump. Now, obviously, there was a poll today that with registered voters, he and Biden are in a dead heat. That's not surprising. Those horse race polls.
Is that the one I sent you where it said that he's more preferred by voters than Biden on economy and handling coronavirus?
Well, that's funny because Biden
you've got to feel so badly about yourself.
I don't know how we could. I don't know how we could evaluate how someone who has not handled.
I'm just thinking if you're Joe and you're thinking how do people feel about me, and you think more people think Donald Trump would do a better job with coronavirus than I would do with coronavirus. That just says that's got to hurt your feelings a little bit. That'd make you say I don't think people think very highly of me. How in the world somebody can think that any politician would not do a better job than Donald Trump with the coronavirus? That you could pick anyone in public, or anyone in the public view, anyone in the public phone book that you think that you would just randomly drop your finger on their name and think that person really wouldn't do a better job than Donald Trump has done with coronavirus, because this has been the most disastrous treatment of a crisis that I have ever conceived of by somebody involved in the federal government. It has now become on the 6th of April just disastrous. So how anyone can think that someone would do, Donald Trump would do better than Joe Biden is just bizarre to me. And it's that kind of thing that spooks me.
Yeah, those those polls are simply snapshots of, and you look at the polling that we were just referencing about white evangelicals was from a couple days previous, and white evangelicals 2 weeks before then were more supportive of Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus, and that had dropped off. So
you're saying it
like
bobs
there's going to
around.
be
It's gonna
there's going to be some ups and downs. So all this to say, when you factor in the stay-at-home factor that happened in 2016 because people thought the election was in the bag. They didn't feel good about voting for Mrs. Clinton for whatever reason, whether that it was sexism or simply because it was Mrs. Clinton, or just why bother? She's going to win anyways. I got better things to do.
Yeah.
That's not going to be in play this time around. Yeah. When you factor in the fact that Joe Biden will not make the same mistake,
he'll make,
presumably, and to not campaign in these key states, right. which I think he will. When you factor in the collapse of, the projected collapse of white evangelical support, and when you factor in Joe Biden playing very well in Pennsylvania, particularly Lackawanna County, all of those things set up a scenario where, like, Donald Trump cannot win re-election. Now, I'll say this. It's Joe Biden's race to lose.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Now,
and it was Hillary's race to lose, and it was Al Gore's race to lose.
Joe Biden could lose the race.
Yeah.
I have been pushing back a little bit. There's this narrative out there that if you vote third party, if you don't vote,
right.
That's a vote for Trump.
The Justin Amash vote.
Listen. Like, and I know this is one of my personal pet peeves, but no candidate for office is owed anyone's vote. When Elizabeth Warren dropped out and didn't endorse Bernie Sanders, Sanders supporters were upset because
I don't think anyone is saying though that they owe the vote. They're just saying to the voter, "Hey, look, this isn't a time for you to express your independence. This is a time for you to pull on the rope with the rest of us."
No, it is incumbent upon the candidate to earn the vote of voters.
Right.
And if Joe Biden cannot earn the vote of voters in a where the table is set for him to win, if he can't do it, that's on him.
Yeah.
That's not on voters.
Yeah, no, I get you. I think this is that's no reason to tell the Justin Amashes of the world, who I'm no big fan of. You don't say to Justin, "Hey, Justy, don't run." But I do think you say to the voters, "Don't vote for the guy. vote over here."
Listen,
I think those are two different points being made. Fair enough.
Yeah, the argument about Justin Amash, he's saying he's going to pull never Trump voters away from Biden, or he's going to cause some Republicans to vote for him instead of Trump. Listen, if he causes Republicans to vote for him instead of Trump, like that hurts Trump.
It's fantastic. Right.
And listen, if Joe Biden can't make the case for why he should be president of the United States as opposed to Justin Amash being president of the United States, that's on Joe Biden. That is not on Justin Amash. It is Joe Biden's job to make the case of why he should be president of the United States.
I just do want to say to every one of those voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida, consider not voting for Justin Amash and consider voting for Joe Biden. But whatever you do, don't vote for this guy because he's got to go. Because he's got to go. And talk about earning it. The guy who has earned not being voted for this week is John Trump. I mean, it is like we do make light of the fact that Donald Trump is such a catastrophic failure, and it's truly laughable how bad he is. But it's also profoundly dangerous, and he has crossed into the Rubicon of full danger this week. It is. We've been joking that Donald Trump is hazardous to the health of this planet and everyone who lives on it. And that's true, but never more true than it has been in the last 10 days. Just shocking. And not only that he would say something as asinine as put lights inside of a body or drink bleach. I saw some little meme tweet that was first they drank the Kool-Aid, then they drank the bleach. It was actually like not even Kool-Aid. It was like Rite Aid or something, or Powerade that they didn't know. But the fact that Donald Trump does not use his office, which we all expect to be used to inform the American populace of what's going on. This is my big takeaway. I know you've got a long list, but my top line takeaway is I spent some time, which I have never done before, scrolling through Donald Trump's Twitter feed for a week's worth of tweets.
It's a shit show. Are we allowed to say that on this podcast?
We are. It is a shit show. And I'll tell you what else is profound about it is what's not there. Zero. And I mean not a single word of advice, encouragement, or direction on what people should do. Now, it is full of the greatest range of nonsense, from going after people by name and arguing with reporters. But what is not there is a single bit of usefulness. And then I went back and watched and thought about all the things I have watched over the last 10 days, which is an insane amount of television. I mean, if there was a time when Donald Trump was on television and I didn't see it, I would be shocked. I have watched because I stay up late. I get up early. I am focused, one might say, fixated. A therapist might say. There has not been a single time where he has used his power of the presidency to do anything to be useful. Take away the fact that he's a harm regularly. We expect that the president of the United States is going to use his office not to falsely claim that Joe Biden sent him an apology letter, or to rail on his opponents in the Republican Party, or to say that reporters should be acting more like 1950s television characters. Did you see that one? The fact that he does all this nonsense, but then does truly not a thing. There is so much good advice about how to think about this virus, how to connect with your family, how to prepare and how to engage, and he does none of it. He has to go because we cannot stand a country in which a president does not use that office to be a benefit and useful blessing to the people of this country. That's what we all expect out of this guy, and he does it zero amount of time. And I'm not even exaggerating. There is not once. Yeah. Even the prepared statements that they write into his little speech book, his little 3-ring binder. If there's anything in there that's useful, he then riffs on it in a way that diminishes it. It's incredible. This guy has got to go.
That reality was really brought into sharp contrast this week by George W. Bush releasing a video, essentially encouraging the American public. And listen, it has been a common theme for me in this podcast where I've said that part of the role of the president is to be the comforter in chief, is to rally us as people at times of great need. And we have seen presidents do that effectively on both sides of the aisle. And listen, I get that for a lot of people, George W. Bush is a tremendously problematic person. There was, I had a front row seat to a significant argument in my house last night about George W. Bush, and
whimsy.
That I did not.
She's just loaded for bear. Her little 5-year-old brain.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, whimsy. She's got opinions about George W. Bush. Listen, so I get that he's problematic, but what he did in that video is he reminded us what being presidential is all about. Where you say things in an inspiring way, you say the words that the American people need to hear, because that matters. Like, Doug, you and I have spent our lives in pastoral ministry. We know that, there's that old adage in literature and in theology that words create worlds, right? Mm-hmm. That like when you say things, mm-hmm. it helps to shape mm-hmm. the reality in which that we inhabit. Donald Trump has refused to say anything comforting, encouraging, recognizing, the danger and the fear that people have. And when George W. Bush, a former president and a problematic one at that, puts out a video saying, hey, listen, we're Americans. We can pull together. We can get through this. It's the type of
Right.
language, it's the type of words that you absolutely expect from the president of the United States.
It's almost
Now,
perfunctory. It's almost perfunctory. You'd almost want to
Yes,
look at
it's
it and
the
say, like,
job.
of course he says that stuff. You can't
Yes.
believe the guy. He's just mouthpiecing. The guy won't even fucking mouthpiece.
I know. And so yesterday, I don't know if you saw the video from Arizona after he went to the press conference he did in Arizona after he went to the factory that's making masks.
The Honeywell
He was
factory.
asked again about the American public, and he talked about how he's beginning to think of the American people now as warriors.
As warriors. I have it written down right here, as warriors. In other words, as commander-in-chief, I have to send people to their death. The response to the warriors thing was, aren't people going to die if we open? They are, but that's what happens to warriors. Like, that's the setup to this, right? Is I'm going to, I don't know where you were going, but I'm going to just interject for a second. They're thinking about them as warriors so that he can say, well, warriors die in a war. He's setting up the fact that between 70,000 and 150,000 people, which is going to be the death rate in the next 4 months, he's going to be like, well, that's the price that we all paid. Thank you to our martyrs. This is unbelievable. I came off of my couch and just said, you cannot, as the commander-in-chief, call the American people warriors. The American people are the people that you protect, not the people you send into battle. This is, the guy has got to go, because once he gets his brain around their warriors, he will fixate on that as he fixates on everything else, and then believe that his responsibility is not to do anything to stop their deaths, because that's the price of war.
Yeah, and he thinks we're at war with a virus, and that victory is a strong economy.
He thinks we're at war with a virus. It really is unbelievable.
He's consistently called it the invisible enemy.
Yes.
And used that kind of wartime footing and that wartime language. But he thinks that victory is not saving lives. Victory is not eradicating the virus.
Yes.
Victory is the stock market going back up.
Victory is his victory. Victory is him winning re-election.
Yes.
And all the rest of that is a tactic. The guy truly believes, and I think he truly believes this, that the well-being of the country is linked to him being president. So therefore, ergo, if the country is going to be benefited and helped, then he has to be president. So therefore, whatever he has to do to be president is in the country's best interest. He has made this argument long before there was the coronavirus. He made this argument about impeachment. He's made this argument about the press. He's made this argument multiple times, that the president of the United States' commitment is to do what's best for the country. And if he believes what's best for the country is that he's the president, then whatever he does to make him president is not wrong, illegal, or immoral. That's his argument he's been making nonstop for 3 years. It's unbelievable that this is not being called out, that we're having to talk about this. And that's by reading between the lines.
Yeah. And, the Warriors language is one thing, which might inspire some kind of, nobility to it. But the reality is that he does not think of people who would die of the coronavirus as noble in any way. Donald Trump has a long history of essentially believing in eugenics. He says over and over and over again about how great his genes are, about genetically how big his brain is, about how
his family lineage.
He is a family lineage of believing in eugenics. This is why
he's a blood and soil guy. Yeah.
He bought and ran a beauty pageant. Beauty pageants have their roots in eugenics, and eugenics is all about
Well,
there's a. You didn't know that?
I didn't know. Yeah. That's there. It all comes together right now. I don't know how I didn't know that, but of course they do.
Yes. And And listen, and so if someone dies of the coronavirus, well, their genes weren't strong enough. They probably should have died.
Totally. That's why he doesn't wear a mask.
And frankly, we're probably better off without them, right? Like that's his mentality. It's not that, hey, you're making a noble sacrifice. His mentality is, you're weak. You deserve to
thin the herd.
Exactly.
Hey, you know what? I was thinking about this. This guy's got to go.
This guy has
got to go, because this is what you see, his constant commitment. And then this week, okay, I'm going to get to the idea that this week he suggested that they should get rid of the coronavirus task force. Like,
yes,
mission accomplished.
Listen, go ahead. Did I not predict on this podcast that he does not have the attention span to deal with this?
Yes. You did. You said he's going to disband. He's going to disband and I said that's not possible. But once again, about everything with Donald Trump's future behavior, I've been incorrect. You said he doesn't have the wherewithal to keep it going, so he's going to stop it so he can take his traveling show to another direction, which basically happened when he said, I'm not going to the coronavirus anymore, no more press conferences, and then started a press conference that wasn't called the coronavirus press conference. I mean, he felt like, I think coronavirus press conference has kind of taken over the space that I want. I want to be this. So the idea that he has said the White House is no longer going to have one, but FEMA will. We're going to move this to the agencies. Now, for people who don't know and should not have to be worrying about this and thinking about all this, when a president decides that something's coming from the White House versus an agency, that's a significant move. So when a president decides to put an office in the White House, what it means is it's going to have the president's full attention, as compared to the myriad agencies that exist, FEMA, Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, all of this, that it's closer to him. It's in the House. It's, in other words, there's no one else running that department. He's running that department. It's inside of the White House. So when he had the White House coronavirus task force, it was inside. Then to say, as Mike Pence did, well, we're deciding if it's going to be more efficacious or to move it to move it out of the White House is basically to say he doesn't want to be bothered by it anymore, which is where you nailed it on the head.
He does not have the attention span to stick with something hard and difficult over the long haul.
And he's not smart enough to do this. He can't handle it.
If he does not have fast, quick success and turn something around quickly, he wants to move on to something where he thinks he can be successful.
That's right.
Exactly.
All right. So here's my other bit about this. There are two things he did again this week that sort of crystallized in my mind. Calling the American people warriors, unbelievable. And secondly, saying to himself, he wants to be saying about himself, he wants to be the cheerleader for the country. Look, I'm a big fan of the work that cheerleaders do, but let me just play his metaphor for a minute. I was a athlete in high school and college, and as a college basketball player, we were graced with having cheerleaders, men and women that would cheer on the crowd. What the crowd is doing is cheering on the players and creating an atmosphere to benefit the players. The difference between the cheerleader and the players is massive. Not that cheerleaders aren't important, but the point is that the cheerleaders are cheering on the players to perform in such a way that they will win. What we need from a president is not that he's the cheerleader, but that he's the captain of the basketball team. That what he shouldn't be doing is turning to the crowd with a megaphone and yelling, "We've got spirit." Yes, we do. What he needs to be doing is be inside the huddle during a timeout, talking to the other players about how you're going to win the game, that the cheerleaders are doing their part to encourage the crowd to do their part. What Donald Trump doesn't want to do is to be a player. He wants to be a cheerleader, and the president needs to be a player. Now, this is not totally original to me. That metaphor sort of, drummed out like that is. But this is what happened when the governor of Washington State said to the president, we don't need you to play backup. We need you to be Tom Brady and to go out and to lead this team. And then Trump said, and the governor of Washington told me I was Tom Brady. No, he said, be like him, please. But I want to extend that metaphor even further. Trump isn't playing backup. By his own declaration, he took off his jersey and he put on a cheerleader outfit and said, there's other players. Our system is not designed for the players to take off their jerseys if they're the president and become a cheerleader. He just fundamentally misunderstands the job that he is in. He needs to be the president and not a cable news host. I know every night he sits and watches cable news like me and you and think, I'd kind of like to have a cable news show sometime. You're the friggin' president of the United States. You need to do that job first.
I am not watching cable news at night. I'm watching Naked and Afraid reruns, but that's a whole nother thing. I am, as I posted on Facebook last week, I'm sitting in my bed, drinking a glass of wine, eating animal crackers, judging the people who are tapping out on Naked and Afraid. But listen,
we saw an ad for Naked and Afraid, and in our house, and Shelley and I looked at each other and said, "Why would there be a show like Naked and?"
It's amazing.
So this tells you that the range of viewership that there is. Those who love it with a glass of wine and animal crackers, classy as they are in Arkansas, and others who are just like, I don't understand why that show exists.
Fantastic.
Is it really? Is it a top quality show?
It is. It is amazing. I mean, it's on its 11th season. It's got to be good, right? So listen, let me push the quantity is the standard.
How long was Donald Trump's show on? What was the show he was on? The Apprentice.
The Apprentice. Yeah,
8 seasons.
Listen, let me push the cheerleader analogy a little bit more,
please.
Do you know what the worst thing to do is?
Here we go.
Doug, I know you're not a huge sports fan. I know you probably don't go to a lot of University of Minnesota football games.
I'm a player, not a fan, as they say. I'm a player, not a fan.
So the worst thing in the world is to go to an Arkansas Razorback football game.
Yes, it is.
When they when they're playing Alabama and they are getting beat 42-7.
Okay.
And the cheerleaders run on the field and act like they have a chance or are winning. What cheerleaders do is disconnected from the reality that is happening in the game.
Yes, good.
There is no connection between what cheerleaders are doing because they are always cheering. It's not connected to you can be getting blown out and the cheerleaders aren't going like, ooh.
No, in fact, we heard Mia Pace, professional cheerleader, tell us and say at one of our Vote Common Good events, a former professional NFL cheerleader, that she had to pull her cheerleaders together one time when the Ravens, who she cheered for, were doing so poorly and say, our job is to make a fan experience no matter what is happening on the field. That's our job, to your point, right? She's saying our job is not to just mirror what's happening on the field. It's to give people a positive experience despite what's happening on the field.
So when Donald Trump says, we've got everything under control,
there it is.
Not matching what is the reality happening in the game.
Yes.
When Donald Trump says there's 15 cases now and by next week there'll be 0, cheerleading, not matching the reality of what's happening in the game. Over and over and over again, when he's promoting medications that people ought to be taking, not matching the reality. When he's talking about, anybody who needs a test, wants a test, can get a test, not matching the reality of what's happening in the game. He is disconnected from the reality of what's happening. He does not want to make a difference. He does not want to win the game, so to speak. He wants to be the cheerleader. Here's the thing. Cheerleaders, they don't get the credit for the victory.
And they would never take it.
And they and they
Right?
don't. Yeah, yes.
There's
And
no
they
Razorback
also-
cheerleader that's going to come out there and be like, "Hey,
Yeah,
you're welcome."
yeah, that's right. Like, yeah, we beat LSU. Like, it was because of no, it wasn't because of the cheerleaders. It was because of the players in the game. What Donald Trump is doing, he doesn't want the responsibility.
He doesn't want to be a player.
I think he recognizes the reality that, like, this is bad, really bad, and it might get better for a little bit, but it's also it's very likely that it could get worse, and he doesn't want the blame for that.
Totally.
And so he's trying to take himself out of the game. I think people are going to see through it, but because he wants out of the game is reason why he has got to go.
He has got.
We need
go.
a president who is going to
who
roll
wants
up their
to
sleeves
who wants the
and
job.
is going to do it.
I mean, that's the thing that's so stunning to me, to watch him day after day after day basically say, the job that is mine is not the job that I want. The job I want is this media job. I want to be the press secretary for the president. Like, he feels like he doesn't want a press secretary because says, I'm the best I'm my own best press secretary. We don't need a press secretary. We need a president. And look, this is the thing that I say to my colleagues and friends who are Trump supporters, is like, he's just bad at that part of the job. Can't you grant that he is horrible at being president? And if you all are thinking about how you're going to make an argument to your friends who are still thinking about voting for Trump, no matter what his administration has done, he has been bad at being president. He is a unaccomplished, not up for the task, unqualified, unmitigated disaster at being in the role. Quite literally, he got himself impeached. The other night, when he was asked by David Muir of ABC News about the situation we're in, Trump said, well, when I got in here, the cupboards were bare. And he's like, so what did you do for 3 years to make sure the cupboards weren't bare, right? You've been president. Look, this is not like George Bush saying on 9/11, I've been president for less than 9 months. Like, all that intel, I mean, he owned the fact that his own intelligence agencies didn't deal with the intel in 9 months. Trump's been president for 3 years, 3/4 of his term, and then is saying, well, when I got here, the cupboards were bare around how we'd respond to a pandemic. So he was asked, well, what did you do to fill the cupboards? And you saw his response, right? Well, they talked about Russia. They talked about Ukraine. They impeached the president. I had a lot of stuff going on. Do you know why they talked about Russia? Because of your behavior. Do you know why they talked about Ukraine? Because of your behavior. Do you know why they impeached the president? Because of your behavior. So your excuse for why you were distracted was, I distracted myself.
Yes. And
I tied myself up in knots, couldn't figure it out, and the other people all around me were trying to respond to my nonsense day after day. And this is why when people say, don't bring up stuff that happened in the past, can't we just solve the problem of today? I would love to do that, but the problem of the past is a repetition of what's happening today. It is the same thing. And that's what makes Donald Trump so maddening and why he has got to go, because he has a single note that is just blown on one of those recorders that kids learn music in school, and they just blow the frickin' recorder over and over until otherwise decent people are just feeling like they're going mad.
Yes. Doug, what is the number one accomplishment that Donald Trump claims for in his presidency?
Judges, 232
How many?
judges.
Yes.
And two on the Supreme Court, judges.
Can I just point something out?
Would you please?
Donald Trump doesn't get judges onto the bench. He and his team submit names. It's actually the Senate that confirms them.
Yes. It's also Mitch McConnell's greatest accomplishments.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell has gotten 200 and some judges appointed to the bench. not Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Even his number one accomplishment that he trumpets and tweets about all
Fantastic.
the time, he has not done.
Yeah, the thing. So it's in previous recordings and podcasts, I would complain about senators who, when they want to run to be president, basically make the argument: if you make me president, I'll be a really good senator. Right? They'll say things like, "We need to have this law," and you say, "Well, the executive of the executive branch doesn't create that law. The senators do, and the House. So why don't you be a good senator and not think you have to have the other job in order to do your job well?" Where Donald Trump, on the other hand, is basically saying, what's made me a good president is that Mitch McConnell has been a senator that I like. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like, he's basically saying, I want to be the press secretary, the cheerleader, and a senator.
Yeah, he wants to be majority leader of the Senate.
Could somebody please remind the man that he's the president and he's got to go, and what he ought to do is resign so that he can go be a cable news host and a cheerleader? Or perhaps I don't want to speak for Vice President Mike Pence, but perhaps if Donald Trump resigned, he could be Mike Pence's press secretary and finally have the job that he's wanted all along, where he gets to stand in front of the press and wheel and deal and take in questions and say all of his snappy, witty things with no responsibility as the cheerleader, because someone's got to go out on the court and talk to the players. So in this unbelievable world, we have a federal government sitting on its hands or holding up its pyramid and its pom-poms and saying to people, everything's going to be okay. I want to be happy talker. And look, we are going to, as we've all seen the statistics, we're going to move to twice as many deaths a day as this virus has now had a chance to move around the country. And when we relieve social distancing requirements, the death rate is going to climb. And I am so desperately afraid that we've already become desensitized to 70,000 deaths in a month. I had said to my neighbor, and I said this in every one of these podcasts, and I'm going to say it like I'm friggin' Joe Scarborough every morning. Well, that guy has lost his cork. I mean, do you watch Scarborough in the morning? Holy moly. Talk about a guy that just can't say anything but Judge Wapner's on at 4. I mean, he has just lost it. He just says the same thing over and over and over. But I'm going to be that guy for just a minute. I said to my neighbor, John, look, John, if this country has to look itself in the face and say that 50,000 people died in a month, we're not going to stand for it. Once again, I was wrong. No, we're standing for it. People are just like, oh, it's at 70,000? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's going to be at 100,000. It's going to be at 200,000 people that have died of this virus. And what is the federal government's response to it? I want to cheerlead. We're going to open the country back up. I want the governors to do the right thing. I don't want this to exist. La, 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 la. Donald Trump is like the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil monkeys, but it's not evil that he's saying. It's hear no reality, see no reality, speak no reality. And it's devastating. And meanwhile, back at the Batcave, this guy is sitting up like taking apart the people who are working for the Lincoln Project. Now, look, a big fan of the Lincoln Project. Glad of what they're doing. But maybe they need to pull back a little bit because they're so deep inside his head with their ads that he can't think straight. He's staying up too late because he's obsessing about them. Just pull back a little bit so the guy could at least for a minute not wake up blurry-eyed and unaccomplished by 10 a.m. in the morning. Remember those commercials about I'm a Marine or Marines do more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day? I sort of have this idea that the commander of the Marines has a lot to do. When you're timestamp tweeting at 1 a.m. and not timestamp tweeting until 11:30 a.m., people pretty sure you slept in. And one reason this guy's got to go is not only is he a cheerleader instead of a player, he's lazy and he doesn't do anything. He just doesn't
I
work.
would suggest this. I know you're saying maybe the Lincoln Project ought to pull back because they're distracting him from what he should be doing.
Yeah, because they're making him stay up late.
Yeah, listen, I don't want Donald Trump in charge of this. And
all right.
And if he's going to be tweeting about the Lincoln Project rather than, tweeting about how people ought to be drinking bleach and taking untested malaria drugs for the coronavirus, I would rather him be, angry tweeting, hate tweeting at Rick Wilson than putting more Americans at risk by his total incompetence.
Yeah, I guess this is why he's got to go, because there's no
there's no good answer.
You can't win. You're like, if he stays distracted and the federal government stays, in dithering mode, which, his denials, delays, and dithering have been what have caused this. If he stays in dithering mode, that's horrible. If he kicks out of dithering mode, the stuff he says is dangerous. So it's just...
He cannot be trusted to be an effective leader in any way because as we've said, he is incompetent, he is corrupt, and he is cruel, and he can't do the job. He's got to go.
You know what we need to do? We need to come up with a full alphabet of alliterations. We've got C's.
C and D down.
We need to come up with a look. If anybody listens to this podcast, help us out. Pick a number, pick a letter, and give us your alliteration.
Three alliterated things of reasons why Donald Trump has to go. He's got to go.
I don't know. And please let all the P's be a silent P, because that would be just fantastic. Pfeiffer, pterodactyl, I don't know, whatever you can come up with.
Yeah. Do you have more serious reasons why Donald Trump has got to go?
Just a couple. S.E. Cupp, who is a conservative, never Trumper commentator, has this really nice bit that she does to basically say, look, I'm not a doctor or anything, but just as a friend and as a coworker of others and as a family member, I'll just say, this is me paraphrasing S.E. Cupp, if anybody else in my life behaved the way he does, with his delusional talk, with his incompetence, with his unfollowable arguments that he's making, if anybody else behaved that way, a family member, a friend, a coworker, you would go to someone and enlist their help. It is when you sit in front of the Washington Monument and say, people have said Lincoln Memorial, that no president has been treated worse than me, maybe even that guy. It is everything Donald Trump is criticized about is not an exaggeration. It is not a conspiracy. It is not an Obama-like attack that is rooted in something you can't see. It is quite literally the thing he did and someone talking about it. There is nothing missing. There is no overstatement. Donald Trump, if he's been treated badly, it's because he's behaved so badly. Is it possible that Donald Trump has been treated worse than any other president? If it's true, it's because he's worse than any other president. And the daily experience of the press, commentators, and citizens to have to say, what did he do? Not only in his own personal behavior, but in his choices, in his administration, in his policies. So all of this to say that, because I have a lot of friends that will say, well, now you know how it felt to live under 8 years of Obama, right? And I get what they're saying. They're saying, yeah, we hated Obama the way you hate Trump. We thought his and I'll say to them regularly, but all the critiques you had about Obama were either on policy, which is fair, or on something that wasn't true. Like, He's a Manchurian candidate. He's running some sort of a scam. He's got something going with the gun thing, the Furious and thing. He's got been got like all of this is something that's not that you have to say like, but you have to go read this thing or you have to go watch this YouTube video or you got to piece it together. None of that is what's happening here. This is Donald Trump standing out in front of the American public and saying it regularly. Like when I say he wants to be the cheerleader and not the player, that's because he said, my job is to be the cheerleader. I didn't say, I think he's being like a cheerleader and I'm applying. He's been the cheerleader. When we say, I think he was asking for a quid pro quo from Ukraine, it's because he said, but you need to do us a favor first. When it was about Russia, it's because he brought the Russians into the Oval Office after firing Comey, and with the Russian press there and not the U.S. press said, our problem is solved. Like, and he fired, like, all of this stuff is because literally of what he did. And I know there's two sides to every story, but all in all, at the end of this rant, the reason he's got to go is because of what he has done for 3 years as the president of the United States. Amen. Should we pass the plates? All right.
Listen,
well, I feel like you're going to say something much more lighthearted than that terrible rant of mine.
Here's the quote. I was captain of the baseball team. I was supposed to be a professional baseball player. Fortunately, I decided to go into real estate instead. Donald Trump quotation to MTV 2010. Some enterprising person went back and found some stats from when he was a player for the New York Military Academy.
And this was when he was in high school, right?
High school.
Yeah, because the military academy is where you go for high school.
Yeah, that's because
it's a military high school
available because he didn't play professional baseball. He didn't play college baseball. He never went to a minor league baseball team. He said, again,
okay.
I was captain of the baseball team. I was supposed to be a professional baseball player. His batting average, 138.
You know, that's better than what he's done as president. He got to 100. He got one hit.
138 is, that's out of 1,000. Not good.
How many professional baseball players in high school batted 138? Zero. Pitchers.
Not even the pitchers. Not even the pitchers.
Pitchers clearly hit better than that because in high school, to be a pitcher, they don't have designated hitters.
Listen, and listen,
only in the American League.
If you lie about something small to make yourself look good, you will also lie about big things to make yourself look good. Like, I don't know, the number of cases, the number of deaths, the projections that exist, the number of tests available, all of this stuff. Donald Trump is a serial pathological liar, and he's got to go.
He's got to go. Well, to your point, which you've made a couple of episodes ago, why would you lie about that? There's no one asked you. No one. It's not like when poor Paul Ryan was on some radio show and he said something about his workout routine, said he'd run a marathon, and somebody asked him what his marathon time was. He goes, I don't remember. And then he said, like, I don't know, 2 something. And like, no, that's world-class speed. And he's like, he got it wrong. It was 3 something.
Yeah.
And people are like, you would never forget your marathon speed. Like, okay, that's the kind of mistake, over grandiose sense because someone asked you.
Yep.
My guess is he brought this up.
He volunteered that.
He moved a conversation that was not asking him about his high school accomplishments in baseball. Yeah. He brought it up and it wasn't true.
Not true. And listen, people misspeak. I mean, I remember us spending an hour on the bus, when we were all over the country, talking about the time that President Obama once said that he visited 57 states. Yeah. And we dissected that and figured out, and it's just kind of a misspeak. Similar, Donald Trump, earlier this week, and I've seen people making fun of him on Facebook and on Twitter for it, where he said that he talked to hundreds of governors this week. That's just that's a misstatement.
Right.
He doesn't actually think there are hundreds of governors, right? But
what he didn't know was that there were hundreds of countries. Because he said, and not because I'm making fun of him because of a misstatement, he said 182 countries. Who knew there were hundreds of countries? He said, boy, that's a thing people didn't know. I've only learned this because I'm president. None of you knew this.
Yeah, all of us who had 8th grade geography knew that. Listen, these things that Donald Trump does, these are not understandable misstatements.
That's right.
They are outright lies designed to protect him.
Right.
And someone who cares more about himself than the American public, especially in the midst of a pandemic, has got to go.
Has got to go. And anyone who honestly thinks whatever I say about myself right now in this experience I'm going to have hearing myself say this is what's more important than the fact that someone's going to look it up. Do you think he doesn't think people will look it up, or do you think he doesn't care that people will look it up? What do you think it is?
He cares. I tend to think he is a pathological liar who cannot help himself. And I mean, I don't think he cares. He moves on, he goes on. I mean, he's done this repeatedly with the number of people who show up at rallies. I mean, we personally experienced that where we were at a rally with 11,000 people, a Trump rally, and the next day he said there were 40 to 50,000 people there. We were literally in the building that had a capacity of 12,000 that he said.
Yeah. And then we went outside where there were hundreds.
Yeah.
And he said, well, total there were.
Listen,
And look, right out of the chutes, from the inauguration when he sent poor Shawnee out there to have to say, well, more people watch this because of live streaming. I mean, even that's just not true. It's just insane.
And listen, in politics, you expect people to bend the truth. You expect people to spin things, to put the best possible framing on things.
Right.
That's not what any of this is.
None of it.
This is literally life and death for tens of thousands of American lives. It is unconscionable.
It's dangerous. It's truly, truly dangerous. And look, if you think, even if somebody makes the argument, I wish our federal government didn't have the amount of power it has. Fair argument.
Sure.
I wish the presidency didn't have the amount of power in the federal government that the presidency has. Fair argument.
Sure.
But it does. And because it does, the person in that role has to do the job that has all the power that the presidency has until it doesn't have that power. And look, Donald Trump's abdicating of his responsibility and giving away his power doesn't change the fact that the system is set up for that position to have that power. There isn't anyone else. It's like someone driving a car and saying, I want to sit in the back seat. So they say, I should be able to sit in the back seat. So they go to the back seat and there's no one driving the car. When Donald Trump doesn't do what the president needs to do, there's no one doing it. Repeatedly, here's what historians are going to argue about. Historians are going to argue, was Donald Trump's greatest failure the bonehead things he did, or the abdication of the things that he should have done? Is it what he did or what he didn't do? Which is worse? And this will be an unsolvable dilemma for historians for 100 years.
Listen, we've been very sports heavy in this podcast. So let me maybe close with one more sports analogy. Thankfully, ESPN and Netflix has released over the last several weeks these really amazing documentaries about the 1990 Chicago Bulls, The Last Dance. Really amazing stuff. There's an episode about Scottie Pippen.
I thought they
And
were
Scottie
all about
Pippen-
Michael Jordan. They're not. They're about the Bulls.
Well,
as
I
a
mean,
whole?
it's about the Bulls' final season, their
Okay.
final championship season. It's very focused on Jordan. But there's an episode that
Okay.
focuses on Scottie Pippen. There's an
Great.
episode that focuses on Dennis Rodman. One that focuses on Phil Jackson, telling their story. And Jordan is
Right.
inextricably linked to all of them.
Because he was the greatest cheerleader the Bulls ever had.
Listen, so Scottie Pippen is one of the greatest basketball players ever to play the game. Won 6 championships, maybe the greatest number 2 person on a team ever. One of the greatest defensive players, certainly the greatest athlete to ever come out of the state of Arkansas. Scottie Pippen is a legendary basketball player. Conversations about Scottie Pippen after that episode aired, the second episode aired. Do you know what the conversations were about? Hey, do you remember that game when Jordan was playing baseball and the Bulls were in the playoffs and Phil Jackson drew up a play for Tony Kukoc to take the final shot and Pippen to be a decoy? And Pippen got so mad that he sat on the bench and didn't go into the game at the end of the game. Scottie Pippen is like in the first paragraph, he is remembered for he's one of the greatest basketball players to ever play who did not get in the game when his team needed him most one time. Donald Trump will be remembered for sitting on the bench when we needed him most. I think historians, to your point, Doug, I think historians will remember him for the things he has not done, not for the things that he has done and bungled terribly.
Nice. Well, I'm going to go watch that documentary, and you know what I'm most interested in right now? Who were the cheerleaders for the Bulls during that run?
I mean, the Bulls.
Unbelievable. I want to be the cheerleader for the country. Good Lord.
The bad guy in the series is the Bulls general manager Jerry Krause, because he makes the argument that organizations win championships, not the players.
It's a solid argument that never wins the day.
And Michael Jordan's like, wait a minute, are you suiting up and taking these shots? Like, we need people in the game. Donald Trump doesn't want to be in the game. He doesn't want to lead because he's afraid he's going to miss the shot, because he always does.
Yes.
He wants to be a cheerleader because he's incompetent and all he can do is run his mouth.
Yes.
And in whatever's going on in his head that's disconnected from reality, and he has got to go.
He has got to go. And just because I can't quit on this thing, what Donald Trump is, when he says, I want to be the cheerleader, he speaks about it aspirationally. Right? Like, I want to be that.
He could be that.
He's
George
not
W.
totally.
Bush
He's not
us,
even that.
George W. Bush showed us what it looks like, and he can't even do it.
This is the thing. His aspiration is to be the country's cheerleader, and he's so frustrated that the press won't let him be, that just to sharpen the point here a little bit, it's not even that he's being the cheerleader and not the player, not the captain of the team, not the star of the team. He wants to be the cheerleader.
Sitting on the bench looking at the cheerleaders going, I would rather be over there.
I want to be a cheerleader. What does it have to do? It's almost as if he's in the crowd, or worse yet, he's outside the gym looking in, thinking, if I buy a ticket, maybe I could go in and maybe I could be a cheerleader someday. This is to just bend this metaphor because, and again, Donald Trump brought up the metaphor of wanting to be the cheerleader. I want to be the cheerleader. Well, Mr. President, aim a little higher. Would you please? And if you won't, then please, just go. You can go tomorrow. Somehow, I don't think he'll listen to this podcast, but somehow I just dream that he will, the psychic forces that Marianne Williamson told us about would carry this on the psychic winds to him. This can all be over tomorrow. Tonight. Right now, you could call a meeting in the Oval Office and say the words that I have longed to hear you say since January 20th, 2017. Therefore, as of noon tomorrow, I resign the presidency of the United States. You can do that tomorrow. Resign the presidency and go be a cheerleader.
You know what he could do if he resigned the presidency at noon tomorrow? You know what he could be doing at 8 p.m. tomorrow?
Teeing off,
hosting a show on Fox News.
Oh,
He could.
I bet they would give him the 8 p.m. slot.
And it would have great ratings.
But by the way, when I went through his Twitter feed, do you know what was on there? Stuff about his golf courses. He's in the middle of pitching the value of his golf courses with his own little thumbs while there's a pandemic raging.
He's got to go.
And so do I. I have to not only leave, but as this podcast title seems to imply, I really got to go. See you, everybody, and good luck.